Ladies and gentlemen, we now have a panel discussion. This is the Retail Leaders Conclave, the hot shots here. And this session will put the spotlight on fostering the retail leadership spirit, forging passion, idea, scale, opportunity, and ambition. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming on stage our distinguished speakers. He is Chief Executive Officer, Bestseller India. A warm welcome to Vineet Gautam. Please put your hands together for Chief Executive Officer and co-founder, Kama Ayurveda, Vivek Sahani. He is Managing Director, Sri Sri Tattva. A warm welcome to Arvind Barchasvi. He is Chief Commercial Officer, Tata Trent. A warm welcome to Venu Nair. Please put your hands together for Country Manager Forever New India. A warm welcome to Dhruv Bhogra. Let's put our hands together for Chief Executive Officer Lakme Lever, Pushkaraj Shenai. Please put your hands together for Executive Director and Head DLF Shopping Malls, Pushpa Bector. And ladies and gentlemen, to conduct this entire panel discussion, our distinguished moderator, Senior Partner and Managing Director, the Boston Consulting Group Advisory Member, Abhik Singhi. And it's over to you, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. Is my mic working? Yeah, okay. Thank you to all our panelists for being here. I think it's very rarely that you get such a distinguished set of panelists. The one challenge which the timing of this, which has thrown for us, is for us to hold the attention of the audience for the next 45 minutes. So instead of going the standard way of asking everyone the same question, I'm going to do a little bit of a twist and turn in this. So let me just take a minute to set up the context for this session and then start it off. I was struck by the title which was there, which was to talk about from idea, inspiration, passion of retail. If one traces back the history of retail industry in India, it is over the last few years that we've seen growth, profitability all come together after a few years of experimentation, after a few years of a lot of hard work, which many of the people in this panel obviously have been front and center on. And therefore, if really one thinks about a good time to be in Indian retail, it's probably now rather than a decade back, where there used to be only news of doom and gloom. Interestingly, while today there is news of doom and gloom in many of the other sectors, if you look at retail and if you look at the numbers over the last few quarters, actually many of the retailers have really withstood what has happened in the broader market. And I think is a testimony to the effort that many of them have put over the last many years to actually make it happen. So let me start off with one question to each of the panelists, and in the interest of time, I will request all of you to just keep it brief. The question is, if you had to think of one retailer that you admire, who would that be and why? And given that many of the people themselves are retailer, I would say maybe who's your second most favorite retailer besides your own brand? So don't talk about your brand. Who is the one retailer that you admire and why? Think of it as the equivalent of the rapid fire round, and maybe Dhruv, start with you.
Good morning, everyone. I think one retailer that I really admire from personal experience in the last few months is Lenskart. I think it's a fantastic blend of great customer service and the use of technology in the store to enhance the customer experience. So they're really good at what they do.
Good afternoon, everyone. For me, I think it's probably the same as a lot of people in this audience. It's Zara is the brand which I've always admired for years together, and it's just the focus they have on the market they are in, their customer, about the experience in store, and being just that half a step ahead of the customer every time, all the time.
Can we have the mic, please?
Check, check, all right. So that's going to be an extremely interesting question for me, considering that my products would be across all these retailers. So, but just to name a few, I'd like to say that, you know, Tata is something that what we are extremely proud of being, considering that they have a lot of values. When it comes to DMart, they're more customer-centric, and they see that what the customer requires. One particular retailer across borders, especially in Oman, Spar is one such people, you know, a retailer that what we've extremely had great relationships with, and they're extremely professional. So just to name a few of them. And of course, Walmart is something that's keeping up with change in tide and also time and also technology. So this is something that what we feel that we are extremely being proud of being across these retailers.
So I'm going to cheat a bit. The retailer that I believe works really well in the country today is, of course, Zara. Zara is one which truly is fast fashion. You don't get clothes that are repeated every, you know, and they are new, fresh fashion. When it comes to a brand which is I'm most excited about entering the country, it's Uniqlo. We believe that Uniqlo is one brand which will actually change the way shopping is done, because our bet is the fact that the TG, the target audience, is a very wide one. Even a young kid has something to pick up from Uniqlo, and a senior citizen has something equally good. And the way they are infusing technology in clothing, so I think that that's a great one. And last one is actually I admire Kama a lot. I think it's a great example of a make in India product which has a global reach and which is so stylized and yet authentic.
So I think a retailer that I admire the most, and I'll not take the Indian context, is Apple. I think the quality of retailing, the experience they're able to create, the customer service, the kind of retail stores they put up, I think is something to be admired and learned from. And though their products can be sold from everywhere, but I think people aspire to go to the Apple store and get that experience to shop. So I think Apple for me.
You know, I'm not sure about retailer, but what I did think about was what I enjoy reading, which is the New York Times. It's something which, you know, I read pretty much every day. It gives me a great deal of pleasure in the information I consume, in the way I consume it.
I just want to make sure that people are able to hear you. Is everyone able to hear?
Yes. And what I actually did was I actually looked up their mission. And it says, our mission is simple. We seek the truth and help people understand the world. It's a very simple mission. This mission is rooted in our belief that great journalism has the power to make each reader's life richer and more fulfilling, and all of society stronger and more just. It's a very strong message, especially in this day where people don't read, are not interested in the news, where there's a huge amount of political pressure on organizations as to how they project information. And I think to be able to do this in a consistent fashion on a regular basis, for me, is quite extraordinary.
So I really love Decathlon. And I think their whole purpose of making sport more enjoyable and accessible comes to life when you're in that store, right? So you see their consumers having fun, but more importantly, you see every person who works for Decathlon enjoying what he or she is doing there, and they're quite experts at their field.
Great. So thank you everyone for that, you know, quick and crisp sharing of perspective of who's your favorite retailer. And you know, the two things which struck me was, if I look at the spectrum which was talked about, you know, ranges from, you know, Decathlon and DMart, which in some sense cater to the value segment. It, you know, has Apple and Kama, which are more at the premium segment. Interestingly, we did a research very recently covering close to 20,000 odd consumers in India across different categories. and we asked them what is the single most important thing for them as they buy something. And I'm going to tell the answer for 3 different categories. So for food and grocery, the single biggest thing was the price. The second, very close, was the quality of fruits and vegetables. For fashion, it was newness of clothes, and the second was price. So it's interesting that what many of you talked about is something which is also being talked about by the consumer and actually being exhibited. One other fun fact, given that you talked about Apple, Vineet, is I was looking at the highest sales per square feet that anybody has in the world. Apple is close to the top. It's not the highest. The highest is actually Tiffany's, right? Because the value per diamond is fairly high. But Apple's not so far behind. And the new or the renewed store that they've opened in New York actually had more visitors than either the Statue of Liberty or the Empire State Building. And 900 employees, et cetera, et cetera. So that's fascinating. The one question that I have that I'll start off with the panelist is, people talk about setting bold ambitions for your company. People talk about the power of idea, and people talk about the importance of execution. And obviously, all 3 are important. But if you had to choose one, even slightly more important than the other, even if it's slightly more important than the other, then which of the 3 would you choose, and in what context? And maybe, Vineet, if I can start off with you, if you could share your perspective.
I think the first and the foremost is the vision, and I think everything else is the part of the vision, because if you do not have great visions, you will not have the idea, or you will not have great execution. So you can't live without the 3. Obviously, a great vision also needs a great idea and a great execution. But I think it's the vision which is very, very important, because if you look at successful retail, look at Steve Jobs, right? He said that consumers don't know what they want. And that was a vision, and I think he put that forth very, very clearly. And obviously, then they produced a great product, and they've seen many failures also before they got in. And then is this overall execution of that entire. So I think the vision for me is the foremost, and I think we've tried to do that a little bit similar in our journey in India. 10 years back, no one knew us, and I think currently all our brands are household names. Every young millennial today comes to our stores to shop and retail. So I think vision is very, very important, and I think that makes companies stand out, and I think post that only you can deliver anything else.
And you mentioned that 10 years back when you guys started off on this journey, how have you made sure that your vision in some sense got translated to your employees as a first starting point?
So I think I had an advantage, because it was a green slate. I could hire the kind of people I wanted. So I think it's very important that when you have the right vision, the kind of team you create is ready to follow that vision and is also as excited, because it is very, very tough otherwise, because if you do not have great people, it's impossible to get great ideas. It's impossible to have excellent execution. Today we retail out of 1,400 points in the country. It's not possible otherwise. So I think every great vision requires great people, and I think that's something which we've always believed. And I think how can you keep them engaged, and how they in turn deliver for you. So for me, I will say a large part of our strength is our people. And the good part of that is majority of them have stayed along in that journey. So I think if you're able to connect the vision and connect the dots and get that kind of same people. So I'm almost, the first part of our hiring was people who wanted to create a different retail journey in this country, because what we've done in 10 years, there has not been done before. So I think it was very important to get such people who could believe in that journey and were passionate enough to follow that through. Yeah.
Arvind, let me ask the same question to you. And the one request I would have is if you could very briefly share a little bit of the history of what you guys have created. I think it'll be an interesting story for the audience, and then answer the question what you were talking about.
check, check. All right. Thanks, Abhi. So, your question is so apt that I'll just dwell a little bit on this, that your question is actually the distance between what success is and what failure is. That a company might have a great vision, but might not implement it well. But you might have great implementing people, but no vision at all. But I think over the last 2 decades, what consumers are really wanting is that what's the story behind the brand also? So you might have a great vision, you might have a great way to implement it, but what's exactly the story? What's your impact that you're creating on the consumer and to society at large? So to give you a little bit about how the brand of Sri Sri Tattva started, we started off in 2003, and at present day, we're there in about 53 countries. We host an area of about 350 plus products, and which range from personal care to FMCG to Ayurveda to doctors to therapists to wellness centers to also stylish clothing wear, Indian ethnic wear, that what I'm sporting today, to yoga wear, and also to high-end skincare line, that what we brought across from the US, and now we also manufacture it here in India. So people are really wanting to know what's behind the brand, what's your story. So here, as a brand, we give back to society. Our products also support farmers here in India. We are also taking this to countries abroad as well. We have touched to more than 2.2 million farmers, teaching them how to get across to organic farming and natural farming. We're also seeing that we do a good buyback from them as well. So people are really wanting to know that what is the story of the brand, what is the product made out of. So for example, even when it comes to our product line, we have no parabens. We ensure that we take care of allergens, saying that we do it in a no-nut facility. We ensure that free-flowing agents, when it comes to our medicines, we do not use talc. We don't use lactose. People have a lot of lactose intolerance, even in India today. So we need to take care of this. So it's extremely important how you educate yourself. So as what you rightly said, that it's important that you have a great vision, and I agree with my panelist. And I would say that it's equally important when you implement it, it's the story behind the brand and what you stand for actually matters to the customer today. Because today, what's really there with the customer is that they have social media, extremely educated. What you don't, they know through Google. So it's very important that you stick to your story, you implement what you can, and you don't overpromise, and you have a nice story to say that what are you going to make a difference apart from you making the profit, what are you changing in that person's life? I think that's where we come from.
Great, thank you. Vivek, same question to you.
And I think my answer is going to be very similar, because I think, and I'm going to relate it specifically to Karma. When we started, it was, to take something which was Indian, which was traditional, and which had proven efficacy. And that was Ayurveda. And we said, this is the oldest codified system of medicine in the world. But, when I started looking at it, it was, some very smelly oils in very ugly bottles. And I was like, ugh, But the most important thing of all of this is that the product works. And I think once you find that, as you said, a product which works, which is effective, and a story that goes with it, and in this case, the story is Ayurveda, together they make a very, very powerful combination, a very potent combination. So you have a story and you have an effective product, both of which actually, create a universe for a client to engage in. Because you're buying into, when you're using a product, you're touching onto India, you're touching onto efficacy, you're touching onto traditional ways of, healing yourself. So there's an entire story that's over there, in addition to just oiling your hair, and that your hair does actually stop falling with the product.
Thank you. I'm going to now change the question, from the idea aspiration to another place where the easy answer would be to say both are important. And this is the point about people and technology, right? Because one says that retail is a business where really the experience at the store is driven by the employee who's at the store. So it's the people which matter. But at the same time, over the last few years, we've been hearing how technology is making such a huge difference. And therefore, technology is actually emerging as the potent force in retail. As you think about from your vantage point, between the two, even if it's 51-49 or 60-40, in the business context that you are in, what is slightly more important and why? And maybe it was different a few years back, would be great to hear. So maybe Pushpa, can I start with you?
It's an interesting question. See, to me, technology is an enabler. It's not the end. Technology gives us an understanding of how to join the dots. In an increasingly complex world, it gives you clarity on who are the communities that we talk about and who's the community who is talking to you back. So the key word to me is community, and community is to do with people. So people will always be over technology for me. I will always look at technology as an enabler, so it need not be any ratio. It is more to do with the fact, and I'll give you a live example. When we looked at the Lookout app that we've launched, it's a unified app where we would like to do proximity marketing through that app. What are we really trying to do? It's a great enabler, but we are trying to get into the B2C space where a mall developer is directly talking to the consumer and saying, hey, what is it that you like? Which are the trends that you like? I will have to talk directly to them. I will have to really look at creating a loyalty platform based on that technology, but it's an enabler to be able to reach out to people. And also, earlier in the day, Raji was mentioning that when we talk about omni-channel retailing, people confuse this, that there has to be silos in the companies. Actually, there shouldn't be any silos. It should be one seamless space where the marketing person is also having another technology enabler with him, but is able to understand data better. Big data are getting thrown at us. We need to understand it better in order to serve the community better, in order to be able to reach out to what's the need gap. And so to me, clearly the answer is people over technology, but technology is an enabler for sure.
Raj, what would your perspective be, given that your business actually is heavily dependent on people, but you guys have also embraced technology?
Yeah, so technology has always been there, right? So at some point in time, you had someone who went into your pantry and brewed the coffee and served coffee to customers. Today, you have a machine that's also technology, right? But I think I'll try and sort of bridge this across both the questions. For me and my learning has been that I think three things are important. Vineet spoke about vision, but I'd just like to articulate it slightly differently. I think it's about purpose, right? The one that really answers why you're in business, why you're existing. What will the world miss if you stop existing from tomorrow? So it's the purpose, it's the people who own that purpose, and that's really critical. And I think, again, some of the panelists spoke about how, it's not one person's vision, but everyone really needs to, every touch point, every stakeholder needs to own the purpose of the brand and the organization. And I think without a watertight process in place, you cannot replicate success in spite of having a great, compelling purpose and a set of people who are really charged. So I think it is, for me, purpose, people, and process. And I think technology has to be subservient to all three, right? At any point in time, technology has to be the slave that really delivers to all three. And if you are alert enough, then you understand how do you leverage or use or enslave that technology to create value for all people involved in that ecosystem, whether it's your consumers or even your employees or your team that really delivers and creates value for the consumers. From the business that I am in, which is a contact sport, it's totally about people. Technology has to be a slave to people.
Venu, any contrary point of view, or you agree with your panelists?
Rather than agreeing or disagreeing, I'll probably give my own view on it. I think, and if I look at people in two forms, one is people, and finally we all sell to customers, and customers are people. And what again it helps is, I think technology today helps us to know our customer a lot better. And I think that's very obvious. Every brand's doing its bit. There is a lot more information available due to technology about what our customer is wanting, what they're buying, where else they're shopping, so on and so forth. So that's an obvious end use that's happening. Also from an employees and stakeholders point of view within the business, technology impacts almost every part of a retail business, right from supply chain to the buying, to the merchandising, to the operations. Every single part of business is impacted by technology, data, availability of data, and the ability to be a lot more quicker, faster, and have a lot more information to make decisions. Now, the impact it has on people is about the mindset of the people working in there. I think the generations that come now will, by default, need to have a lot more of a digital mindset. So again, the kind of people you recruit, the training that you provide will be very different to what it was earlier. It helps everyone because it helps everyone to do their jobs faster, better, and in a more informed manner. But at the same time, what it will also mean is that people need to train and retrain themselves far more frequently because the pace of change and the pace of change within technology is rapid and will continue to be even more rapid.
Dhruv, you get to have the last word on this.
Well, I mean, I agree with all the panelists and the viewers on people and technology, but I have a bit more, I would say, a different view of things from a people perspective. Technology, like we all said and we all believe, is an enabler. It already surrounds us. It's there in the back end, front end. Anything that we do is touched by technology. And in the future, it's going to become a bigger part of our lives. However, there is no substitute for human emotion and human spirit. And technology in retail is a function of which segment and industry you serve and what kind of brand or service that you're providing. I spent a good year and a half traveling through the remotest parts and even some of the popular parts of the Americas. And they're not as obsessed with technology as we are. Countries like Mexico, Central America, the whole of South America, the economies are, you can say retail experiences are driven by people. You know, their outlook to life, their spirit, their attitude to serving customers. None of them are enabled by tablets and algorithms in the back end or artificial intelligence tools that we all talk about. I think we are banking too much on technology to mask our own efficiencies in managing people. So we feel, you know, this guy, he's not going to be able to sell this shoe or this product, or the features are too complicated for this guy. Let me give a tablet. So we invest a whole lot of stuff into Omni and Endless Aisle and tablets, and none of it works. In Adidas, 5 years ago, we were the first ones to launch Endless Aisle in the country. And our target was 3 to 4% of business will come from Endless Aisle. Today, it's not even 0.5%, because the adoption of technology is so difficult. And consumers themselves, that like a certain kind of gadget for a while and they just give it up. I've been to stores where product scanners are just lying unplugged. So somebody's put his brain to it, developed a product, you slip your product under the scanner, and it's supposed to give the consumer the entire touch and feel of what product it is, what fabric it is. But the machine in the store, in one of the best malls in the country, is lying unplugged, and the store staff doesn't even know how to operate it. So where's the experience? So I think we are aping what we've been told to do. I think we need to unbrainwash ourselves and really go back to the basics, like consumers are going back into organic, going back to the spirit, and saying, are we really investing more in technology or our people? And we need to really get that act going and get our people up there to, you know, really get involved with the business. So yes, technology is an enabler, good to understand consumers and drive behavior and also educate them. But at the same time, we are not investing enough, as much as we're investing in technology, on people, is my view.
Great. So I have to confess then, when I asked this question, I had assumed that, you know, there's probably going to be more towards people, but I didn't expect like a 100-0 kind of a thing. It's interesting. I was talking to one of my colleagues who runs the technology and AI practice for us globally, and he said a very interesting thing. He said, of the different projects that he's seen, success versus failure, he actually found that about 10% is driven by the quality of algorithms. He said, basically it doesn't matter beyond a point. About 20% is driven by the quality of data. So everybody says that they have data, but actually the quality of data matters. 70%, so much more than twice the other two factors combined, is driven by how well was the change actually executed. So what has been the adoption like? Everything else is irrelevant. So it's great to hear that our panel also thinks the same. And I'm wondering what the message is for people who actually have the tech solutions. But I'll pause there. One final question to all of you, and I really have to thank you. I think we are running like bang on time, so it's great. So the one final question that I have, and then we can throw it up to the audience in case we have a few minutes, is if you had to think of one retail trend that you think is going to be big in the future. We have this board here saying the future of retail is already here. Are you ready? But if you had to pick one retail trend that you think is going to be big in the future, or if you think about something that you've learned or understood from some customer of yours, what would that be, and what is it that you are doing within your organization to be more future ready? And sort of just in the spirit of mixing it up, Vivek, can I ask you to go first?
I was just going to say, I don't know. I wish I knew what the future was. But I think people are I mean, one thing I do see is that people are more and more conscious of what they're buying. At least,
from a sustainability perspective?
No, just conscious of, well, sustainability, I think just more, I mean, do I need to buy this fourth pair of shoes? They don't necessarily have to be sustainable, but do I necessarily need to have this, this fifth jacket? I think there seems to be a bit of a cognizance of that. And I think, and when that sort of starts getting more spread, that's when these conversations around sustainability and then the stories which we spoke about earlier, about where was this jacket made and who made the jacket, and the story Arvind spoke about, that where was this, what help has this jacket done, has it helped some particular community, who's made it? I think this kind of direction in retail is, I think, an area which I think is potentially very interesting, and I think it's going to expand further. I mean, it's a microcosm right now, but I think this idea of people becoming more cognizant and conscious of what they put on, what they wear, what they buy, what they eat, and if it says organic, is it actually organic? Is it just stamped there as a label? Is it said it's farmed by rural communities? Does it actually exist? Or is it a fictional thing? I think just being more aware of what you consume. I think that's something I think is a starting point now. It's small, it's niche, but I think it's going to spread as people become more and more aware, and also with climate change and with the way the environment is collapsing around us. I think it's something which we are all going to become more cognizant of. And I think most retailers are going to have to take, be aware of this and then take actions and directions towards that.
Dhruv, can I ask you to go next?
I think going beyond the normal concerns or trends, I would say definitely I would agree sustainability is a big issue today. Climate change and the patterns of consumption around it are really becoming a drumbeat across the world. Not a single day goes by when on my newsfeed I don't get an article from some magazine or online newspaper about the impact of fast fashion or the impact of certain consumption patterns across societies on the environment. And I think the young generation, the 18, 19-year-olds who are consuming what all is going on in the world are going to be influenced by that. And maybe not our generation so much because we already used to consuming that much, but definitely the younger ones are going to be far more responsible, far more demanding, and perhaps even cut back on some consumption. And we wouldn't be surprised if that becomes a very big trend, or maybe a long-term trend in the coming future. I think it all depends on the next 2-3 years, what really happens to the climate. And it's a serious problem for the planet. So it's going to impact industries. How it will impact, we don't know. But fast fashion is certainly becoming a problem in terms of the amount of damage it does to the environment.
Anybody wants to go next?
I think in terms of an emerging trend, or it's probably a trend which has been there and is continuing, and Abhig, you referred to it right at the beginning, it's about the customer finally wants newness. And I think that's a trend which has always been there, and I don't see that changing at all. Being true to your brand, offering something exclusive, and we at Westside, right from day one, had the vision of being an exclusive brand, and everything that we retail under our roof is exclusive to us, and being true to the brand, and at the same time offering newness to her and him every time she comes to the store. That's a trend which has always been true and will continue to be true. I don't think that will change. Being true to your brand, at the same time offering great value, going along with that.
I think last few years of my career, I think, and today, and I think it's always been going to be the same, is being how relevant you are. And I think the relevance is something which is important. Whether it's going to be today, it's going to be tomorrow, or 20 years from today. How relevant you are to the consumer, and I think that's the most important part. Today's sustainability, tomorrow is going to be something else. It's going to change, and there are going to be new things which are going to be, which the consumers will want. And I think that's what it's always going to be. How relevant are we? And it's going to be for internal people also, and for external customers also. Relevance is going to be something which we have to be always ready for. 2 years from now, will my brand be relevant? Will my products be relevant? And I think that's something which keeps us going, and I think that's what our jobs are.
So I'll speak about this more from a retail real estate point of view. I think there are two very large trends that we see. One is people are preferring open spaces much more. I think that's a trend. I see millennials, I see, even older generation are preferring to hang out in spaces which are open, which are more green. So in a certain way, what they are wearing or what they're really looking at green spaces which are sustainable. So we at DLF are really working on now mixed-use developments which have organized retail in with far more open spaces, which are green buildings per se, and which are sustainable. At the same time, there are spaces where people feel happy. I think when we did some intangible research, the one thing that is really lacking in the world today is happiness. When you look at the kind of mental health issues that are going up. So people are seeking spaces which will make them feel happy. So I think we see that as a trend. The second trend that I see is definitely people want constant change. They get bored. Their ennui or boredom levels are far higher. So we as retail real estate players, we really have to look at flexible spaces which come up with newer ideas, newer brands constantly. And that is a trend that is going to be the future. And last but not the least, the future of retail should have more women. There are very few women here. So the future of retail.
And very few women on the stage as well.
On the stage as well.
I
That
just
should
want to
improve.
Add, 80% of employees in my company are women.
Hopefully they are in the shops.
No, but we actually know who are the decision makers back home too. So, all right. So, just to answer that.
So, I think we'll take 5 minutes. I noticed that we suddenly jumped from 15 minutes to 10 minutes. So, some magic happened. Please go ahead, Arvind.
So, You know, actually, if I were to encapsulate what my other panelists actually said here, is that what's really being looked at in today's world, whether it's the global market or even in the Indian market, is that people are wanting something that's Indian and something on Indianness. You look at trends in the FMCG sector. You'll have Nimbu Pani, you'll have buttermilk. You go across to a clothing line, it's more on yoga wear, it's more on ethnic wear. And this is a trend that what we've as a brand also seen in places as much as far away even as Argentina and Brazil as well. So people really want something Indian. And also, Madam here also mentioned about open spaces. So if you look at Indian architecture, always had open spaces. So if you look at it, people are actually coming back to what was Indian. You go to a luxury dining place, you'd have molecular gastronomy with pani puri. All right? So people are wanting Indian and Indianness because India has so much to offer, whether it comes to culture, whether it comes to dance. She also made a very important point about happiness. The entire world is looking at India for spirituality and happiness today. And it's something that what India can offer. And what's so different about India is about its diversity, it's about its uniqueness, and it's a place where creativity was given a great platform. And that's why if you look at the thing that also what we champion is the cause of Ayurveda worldwide. Today we are ensuring that Ayurveda is recognized as a system of medicine in a place like Oman, in a place like UAE, in a place like Canada, also now in South America. So what do people really want? People want the best of Indianness, but also it's important for us as brands that represent India that when we go across even to India and also to the world, we give the best of India to people. So for example, as what you also mentioned in terms of technology, it's important that we also imbibe technology. So now today, we've hit a ceiling where our ERP solution, which was once upon a time homegrown, we've changed to SAP S/4HANA. So it's important that we also take technology as an enabler, as what my co-panelist also mentioned, and see how we could bring the best of India to the world.
Raj.
Since I'm speaking last, I'm going to do the FGD tactic and present a summary. I think purpose is really important. And the purpose could be sustainability, it could be democratization, it could be whatever is really the brand's true calling. But I think the retail space, the reason to exist will be if your consumers can come and play with your purpose, right? So more than a theater, which almost sounds like one-way discourse, I think the retail space of the future will be a playground where your consumers can come and interact and play with your brand. And then when you use the word play, there's happiness embedded in it. There's personalization embedded in it. And I think then, things like technology, education of your associates at the front end, those things start becoming really critical. We don't spend enough money in educating and coaching the frontline consumer-facing teams. I think that as we go into the future will become really important because the reason why consumers will come to a store is for those interactions, and unless those interactions are value-adding, it will just not work. And I'll just add a little bit from our Lakme experience. So when we looked at our purpose to exist, we said it is to democratize the backstage experience of Lakme Fashion Week. So that happens, and models and designers are privy to it for those 10 days in a year. We need to democratize that and bring that into our salons. And to be able to do that, then we had to redo our portfolio. We had to redo our entire coaching program. We have a program called Backstage Heroes, which is like the top tier of our training program. Runway Rewards, our loyalty program, has things around it. Being at Fashion Week is like a big thing for our consumers, our franchisee partners, and our frontline experts. So then we've woven everything around that purpose. And once we've done that, and of course, I think it's a journey. Today, maybe we are a 6 or 7 on 10 on that one. And everyone in that, the stakeholder or the ecosystem starts recognizing that is when, you can say that your purpose is coming alive in your retail space.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, the panelists. Thank you, the audience, for being such a patient audience. We are at the end of our time, so would really like to thank our panelists for their crisp, pithy words of wisdom. I am sure that it is of help to the audience. Thank you.